This is the Podcast Lab. Subscribe now and never miss an episode.
Today, we're going deep on social justice movements. And wow, you've sent us a real mix of stuff.
Yeah, real grab bag.
We've got, let's see, academic excerpts. What is this, like a listicle style article from online?
Oh, interesting.
And even a YouTube video transcript.
Wow, okay, so all over the map.
So buckle up because we're going to unpack a lot here. How these movements, how they've changed over time, the power structures they challenge, and the role technology plays, both good and bad.
Right, exactly. You know, I think it's going to be really interesting to see how the sort of theoretical, definitions of social justice from that academic material connect with the real world examples from these other sources.
You know what's crazy to me just looking at this? The sheer variety of movements that people are interested in.
Oh,
I mean, we're talking like historic ones, the suffragettes,
right,
abolitionist movement, all the way to like things that are happening right now, like Black Lives Matter and #MeToo.
Absolutely. And it's not just a Western phenomenon either.
Right. Exactly.
The rarest.org list, for example, highlights that global reach. Things like the Chilean student protests.
Oh, yeah.
Or the Arab Spring. These are examples of how widespread this fight for social justice truly is.
Speaking of that rarest.org list, man, that thing is a gold mine.
Yeah.
Some really fascinating stuff on there. I mean, a movement to, get this, stop dancing goats in Oman.
What?
Really? I know. Like, who knew? I have a feeling that's probably about something a lot bigger than just goats. Right?
Precisely. It's like often these seemingly unusual movements are reflecting some kind of deeper cultural or economic tension within a society. It's just a reminder that social justice can take many, many forms and address all sorts of issues that might seem surprising on the surface.
Okay, but here's where things get really interesting, at least for me. The YouTube video transcript, it talks about Eyes on the Prize. You know that like landmark documentary series about the civil rights movement?
Oh, yeah.
Well, the filmmakers say that today they couldn't even make it. Like, they just couldn't because archival footage has gotten so expensive.
Oh, wow.
It's kind of alarming. Don't you think?
It is. It is a really important point because it shows how the way that we document and remember social justice movements is changing.
Right.
And, as that video highlights archives, especially those that focus on people of color, they're particularly vulnerable to being overlooked, neglected, or just lost altogether.
Yeah.
So we really have a responsibility to be actively preserving these materials.
It's true, It's like if we lose those stories, we're losing a huge chunk of history. And it makes me think, are we doing enough to preserve what's happening right now with social justice movements?
Yeah, that's a great question.
There's so much digital content created every day. What happens to all of it?
I think the digital age presents, both opportunities and challenges.
Yeah.
It's easier than ever to document things as they're happening. But it's also, there's so much, it can be really hard to sort through it all and figure out what's really important. It's definitely something we need to think about as we move forward.
So, okay, we've got this huge range of movements, and we're trying to figure out how to preserve their stories. But let's zoom out for a second.
Okay.
We've got like the academic definition of social justice, right, from the academia.edu excerpt, and then all these real-world examples. You see any like common thread, anything that kind of ties it all together?
I think there absolutely is. I think while the specific issues that these movements address, they're often wildly different.
Yeah.
The core goal, I think, is always about challenging the existing power structures.
Interesting.
So whether it's a system based on race, gender, economic inequality, environmental disregard, it's ultimately about creating a more just and equitable world. And that, I think, is at the heart of it all.
That's a great point. Which makes me wonder, are there like common strategies that these movements use? Is there like a playbook for how to challenge power, or does it just totally depend?
That's a great question. And, one that probably deserves a whole other deep dive on its own.
Yeah.
But it's not so simple as having, one single playbook. The strategies that movements use really depend on the context, the kind of power they're going up against, the resources they have available.
It's like every movement needs its own unique approach. But what really struck me in the rarest.org article was just how many of these movements are global.
Oh, yeah.
It's like people all over the world are realizing they're not alone in wanting a better world. I mean, take the Arab Spring,
Yeah.
right?
That's a really powerful example.
What started with one Tunisian street vendor protesting, well, it ended up igniting these huge revolutions across the Middle East.
Right. The Arab Spring really illustrates that interconnectedness of these movements and how a single person taking a stand can create this ripple effect around the globe. And, we can't talk about interconnectedness without talking about the digital age.
Right.
I mean, movements like #MeToo and Black Lives Matter really show how social media can mobilize people in a way that we've never seen before, raising awareness, putting pressure on these powerful institutions.
It's like everyone has a megaphone now, but is that always a good thing?
Yeah.
Social media can also be a breeding ground for like misinformation.
Right.
And shallow activism, right? Like, how do we walk that line between real engagement and what do they call it, performative activism?
It's a great point. I think technology, especially social media, it's this double-edged sword. On the one hand, it gives a voice to people who might not have had one before and helps them connect across, huge distances.
Yeah.
But on the other hand, it can really distort information and lead to this kind of superficial engagement and sometimes even burnout among activists who feel like they have to be on all the time.
Exactly. Which is why, I found that point in the podcast outline so interesting.
Yeah.
About how important documentaries and long-form journalism still are.
Yeah.
They just provide this context and depth that you just don't get in, like a quick tweet.
Right.
It's like we need both, right? We need that immediacy of social media.
Yeah.
But we also need the thoughtfulness of, more traditional media to understand the full picture.
I think you're absolutely right. Documentaries and good investigative journalism, they play such a crucial role in amplifying those stories of people who are fighting for social justice and holding, those in power accountable.
Yeah.
And they give us that deeper understanding of the issues, going beyond that kind of surface level to really grapple with those nuances.
It makes me think back to what you said about the importance of preserving those archival materials.
Yeah.
Documentaries and journalism, they rely on that stuff to tell the whole story. It's like we have to protect the past to understand the present and build the future, right?
Absolutely. Every single piece of archival material, whether it's a photograph, a document, an oral history, it's like a little piece of this bigger story of social justice. And by saving those pieces, we're making sure that those stories can continue to resonate.
We can't forget, though, that these movements, they often face a lot of criticism, right? I mean, the outline mentioned some of it. Yeah. Accusations of polarization, cancel culture.
Right.
It's like the whole conversation around social justice has gotten so, tense.
I think that's a really valid observation. And it makes sense in a way. I mean, these movements, by their very nature, they challenge the status quo. So it's natural that they're going to provoke strong reactions from people. I think the key is, to acknowledge those criticisms.
Yeah.
And to engage them in a thoughtful way. Are they grounded? Are they being used to just shut down legitimate dissent? These are really important questions to grapple with.
Yeah, it feels like finding that balance between like passionate advocacy, but also being open to dialogue. That's really key. But where do we go from here? What's the next chapter in all of this? I mean, the outline mentioned the rise of youth activism and the focus on intersectionality. What are your thoughts on those trends?
Well, it's clear that young people are really leading the charge on a lot of these issues. I mean, look at someone like Greta Thunberg.
Yeah.
Or the global youth climate movement. They're demanding change.
Yeah.
They're holding leaders accountable.
Yeah.
Their energy and their commitment are incredibly inspiring.
It's like they're not waiting for permission anymore. They're just like, this is our future and we're going to fight for it. And this idea of intersectionality, it feels like it's becoming more and more central to the whole conversation, right?
Absolutely. Intersectionality is about understanding that all these different forms of oppression, racism, sexism, homophobia, transphobia, ableism,
right,
they're all connected. You can't address one without addressing the others.
Yeah.
So it's about working towards a world that's just for everyone, not just certain groups.
It's like we're finally realizing that all these struggles are part of the same fight.
Yeah.
And that solidarity, that recognition of our shared humanity, that's where the real power is.
Exactly. It's about building coalitions across movements and understanding that a victory for one group is a victory for everyone. And that interconnectedness, I think, fueled by technology, but also by a deeper understanding of these issues, that's what's going to drive progress in the future.
It's amazing to see how these movements are changing and growing, but it makes me think about something you said earlier about our responsibility to actually document all of this.
Mhm.
With so much information out there and archival stuff at risk of being lost, what can we do? I mean, what can regular people do to make sure these stories aren't forgotten?
I think the key is to remember that history, it isn't just something static that happened in the past. We're all creating history right now, every single day.
Right.
Every protest, every conversation online, even every little act of resistance, all those things, they all add to the story of social justice.
So it's not just about saving old photos and documents. It's about documenting what we're experiencing right now, making sure our voices are heard.
Exactly. And that documentation, it can take so many forms. We could be writing a blog post about an issue in your community that you care about, or making a video about your own experiences with activism, or even just, having conversations with your friends and family about these topics. It's about understanding that your perspective matters. Your story matters.
I love that. It's like we're all archivists in a way, each of us responsible for adding our own little piece to the big puzzle of social justice history. And those personal stories, they can be so powerful, especially when you share them in a way that connects with other people.
Absolutely. Sharing your story can inspire other people to get involved. It can build understanding and empathy, and it can help break down those harmful stereotypes that are out there. It's a way of, taking control of your own narrative and making sure that the full picture of these complicated issues is out there.
Wow. We've covered a lot of ground today. From the history of these movements to the role of technology, the challenges they face, it's clear that social justice, it's a conversation that's always evolving and changing. So what's your, biggest takeaway from all of this?
For me, it's that reminder of how powerful collective action can be.
Yeah.
And that understanding that we're all connected in this. These movements, they're not isolated incidents. They're part of a bigger story, a story of people fighting for what they believe in, And even though the challenges can seem really overwhelming sometimes, that power of people coming together to fight for a better world, it's an amazing thing to see.
I couldn't agree more. This has been eye-opening for sure, inspiring too. And to everyone listening, if this conversation has resonated with you, don't let it end here. Seek out more information. Find organizations doing work that matters to you and have those conversations. Remember, social justice isn't just something you watch from the sidelines. It's something we create together.
And don't forget, your voice matters. Your actions matter. Every single step we take, even the small ones, they all contribute to a better world for everyone.
Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive into social justice movements. And until next time, keep learning, keep asking those tough questions, and keep pushing for that better world.